The next step is to put in what's called a waist tape. And this is a tape that goes across the waistline of the corset and gives it some stability and some strength because, a lot of the stress on the corset comes right across the waist. So I have all my seams trimmed down very small, the seam allowances, so there's not a lot of bulk in there. And I'm just using a regular bias tape out of the package. I think some people use a twill tape or whatever. And what I'm going to do is just stitch right across there, 1, 2. And I didn't backspace at the very edges because I found that was kind of ugly, so I just, when I've finished the stitching, I take a needle and by hand I just stick the ends through and finish that off. And so then the next step is to put in the lining. You sort of flip it around and you put one lining to the other side, boom, boom, and then flip it around like a pillow. Then it's important to stabilize each one of the seams. The instructions say do not skip this step, even though you're tempted to, and it is very important not to skip this step. So you could either do little pick stitches by hand, or you could do what's called stitch in the ditch, where you very carefully stitch right down in the seam itself, and that way, you're not going to either side of the seam, you're right down in there. Now, unfortunately, I have black and white stripes, and so I'm using black thread, and on the places where it's white, of course, the black threads are going to show up a little bit, but I was okay with that. I thought as long as everything is black or white, it's going to look fine. And so I go very slowly, I cautiously just go right down in the seam line and make sure that the lining seam and the outside seam are lined up perfectly, or as best I can, and that they're both stabilized front to back, and then it turns into one nice solid piece from the lining and the outside fabric. And at this point, there you see, it's right down in the seam line. Not terribly visible, but there it is.